What happens when a political system built around one man for more than 4 decades suddenly begins operating without that man visibly at the center? This is the question that is on the lips of all those who are talking, studying, or digging deep into what is going on with La République du Cameroon at this point in time, not only within Cameroon, but also across the world. Hello, you're welcome to the JMA Connections. Today is Thursday, and this day is the 23rd day of July 2026. And of course, I'm here today for us to have another very interesting conversation about what is going on in La République du Cameroon right now, the decaying situation. And of course, I know a lot of people who still believe that things are working because civil servants are still getting paid their monthly salaries and all of those. I know a lot of people are yet to take note that the state budget for 2026 is not yet in execution, and is not likely to be in execution even in the month of August. But according to the norms, by this time, every year they are literally concluding the first semester of the execution of the state budget. So that first semester ended, the period for its execution ended on the 30th of June 2026, and not a single credit card, be it for the running expenses, or call it recurring expenses, or even the investment budget, has been given out to anyone, and that is a very, very dire situation. So members of the governing organs, both at national and grassroots level of the CPDM, met in Yaoundé yesterday, Wednesday, the 22nd of July 2026, to discuss some teething issues concerning the political situation in the country, and also talk about elections. So let's get into all of that right now. So if you are just coming in, you're just tuning in, you're onto the JMA Connections, and if you're visiting this platform for the first time, please go right ahead and hit on that subscribe button. Make sure you personalize so you'll be the first to know anytime something new drops on this platform. And of course, do well to share the link to this communication as much as possible. Let's get as many people as possible to participate in this live show, and I'd like to see your participation on the live chat. Ask questions that I can answer right now as the broadcast is going on. So let's get into the beef of our conversation. So what happens when a political system built around one man for more than 4 decades suddenly begins operating without that man visibly at the center? Post-Biya left Cameroon on June the 7th for what the presidency called a brief private stay in Europe. More than 45 days after, and today of course is day number 46, he has not returned. No date for his return has been announced. The newly restored vice presidency remains vacant, and the government promised after the October 2025 presidential election has still not been formed. Meanwhile, Tchiroma Bakari, the gentleman who claimed victory and said he won the election and says he's a legitimate president after the October 12, 2025 presidential election, is challenging the political order from abroad. Legal battles are reaching European courts, rivalries are intensifying around the presidential family too, and the CPDM party has just convened an unusually high-level meeting in Yaoundé, of course, whose conclusions we'll be discussing right ahead. So Cameroon may not yet have a constitutional vacancy at the summit of the state, stricto sensu, but increasingly it has something potentially just as destabilizing. That is a vacuum of certainty. This is different. A vacuum of certainty. If you look at the laws, look at everything, then you know there is no vacancy at the helm of the state. Yes, but 46 days out of the country and counting, no. And with all of what is happening, the failure to appoint a new government despite 2 clear-cut promises, and the state budget not in execution, electoral consultations, generally postponed or, extended. I mean, a worsening foreign debt situation. This tells you that there is a vacuum of certainty. So 46 days that are becoming bigger than Biya's absence. That's my take. That's how I really look at it. So we should begin by making an important distinction here. President Biya's prolonged absence from Cameroon does not, by itself, establish that the presidency is constitutionally vacant. That is essentially the strongest legal point contained in Professor Jacques Famendongo's press release issued on the 21st of July 2026. The document argues that no Cameroonian law establishes a maximum period during which the president may remain outside the country, and of course Famendongo insists that Biya continues to examine files and issue instructions electronically. He may be right, because we have seen decrees being signed from abroad. One was published, I guess, yesterday, appointing someone into the board of directors of the National Hydrocarbons Corporation, the SNH. We saw a letter of congratulations to the King of Spain, following Spain's victory at the final of the FIFA World Cup tournament that took place in New York, United States of America. It's true that looking at the facts, a lot of those decrees creating some stir in the public sphere, because people are looking at the signatures from one document to the other as time passes, and comparing the signatures, and saying they don't appear to be signed by the same person, and they don't appear to really be according to the expectations. So, but that legal defense does not answer the political question. I mean, the legal defense that Jacques Famendongo drops out there, that there is no constitutional provision that gives a specific time limit for the president of the republic to be out of the country, and for that to constitute a vacancy at the helm of the state. So the issue is increasingly not where Paul Biya is, but whether a political architecture built around his personal authority can continue to function normally when he remains physically absent for such an extended period. International media, is also doing the countdown. And I noticed on Reuters, VOA, and Dutch Welle, on July the 22nd, that is for articles published yesterday, that Paul Biya's current foreign stay, is already the longest. That's already the longest that the government had given no indication of when he would return, and that criticism of the situation, of course, is mounting and mounting really seriously. So you notice that the international media has taken interest in this particular situation and is also doing the count. Is also keeping the count of the number of days that Paul Biya has spent abroad. And of course, he has beaten every record he had created before in terms of the number of days that he stayed out of the country uninterrupted. That transforms an overseas stay into a test of the entire Biya system. Cameroon has ministers. It has a prime minister who is even head of government. It has parliament, courts, security institutions, and an enormous bureaucracy. Yet major political arbitration has historically remained heavily concentrated around the presidency. When competing factions collide, appointments must be made. A government reshuffle or succession questions settled, everyone ultimately looks towards a today. There's been a very, very souring relation between the office of the Prime Minister, headed by Joseph John Gute, and the office of the Secretary General at the presidency, headed by Ferdinand Gongo. And, the matter has spilled into the public space right to the point where even, teenagers have taken note of the fact that the Prime Minister of La République du Cameroon, Joseph John Gute, is generally being tinified. And everyone would have expected that either Ferdinand Gongo was kicked out or Joseph John Gute replaced to at least ensure some degree of cohesion at the helm of the state. So, and now the central figure has been away for months. Should I say for months? Okay, no. Let's just say for weeks. Because at 46, nothing stops us from getting to 60, right? So let's just say for weeks. That is why the Jacques Famundongo communique is politically fascinating, really fascinating. Because its headline essentially says, stop fantasizing. There is no vacancy at the summit of the state. That's what Jacques Famundongo says. Oh my goodness. If you look at that press release, it is full of what you call, if you are communicating and all your communication say of low frequency word. Just sound, just poetry, just everything. But really in substance, just as empty as most of his communiques have been. So, like I say, he says, stop fantasizing. There is no vacancy at the summit of the state. But governments rarely issue elaborate rebuttals to questions that have no political traction. So if this really wasn't a problem, if this issue was something that really couldn't go anywhere, really does not hold the power or have the potential to shake the stability of the state, nobody will be bothering about issuing press releases. First, it was René Emmanuel Sadi. Now, René Emmanuel Sadi, in his posture as Minister of Communication and should I say mouthpiece of the government, spokesperson for the government, and then this time from Jacques Famundongo, who is the communication secretary for the ruling CPDM party. So the very need to insist publicly that there is neither vacancy nor dormancy demonstrates how seriously the perception of paralysis is taken, not only by people of the Republic of Cameroon, not only by people in government, but by the international community as a whole, and like I said earlier, most especially by the international media that has suddenly turned its focus on Cameroon. Usually Cameroon will not be a very big story, shy of what has been going on in the southern Cameroons. But today the story on Cameroon is not just about the bloody armed conflict or the ongoing genocidal war that Biya has been leading in the southern Cameroons, but about Post-Biya and his ability to run the state of the Republic of Cameroon. So, and then while all of that is being discussed, the CPDM suddenly gathers. So against the backdrop of all of what I've just said, the July 22 gathering of senior CPDM officials in Yaoundé, of course, it took place. And I was looking through the columns of the international news media, Jeune Afrique, Reuters, the BBC, the Dutch Welle, Voice of America, and all of those. They described it as a rare meeting of senior ruling party figures. Reuters in particular used those words. So the CPDM Secretary General Jean Kwete publicly characterized the meeting as an important working session without explicitly connecting it to Biya's prolonged absence. But everyone understands that this meeting was directly connected to Paul Biya's prolonged absence. And of course, do not forget that there are a lot of pundits who even thought that that meeting was necessary to find a way of incorporating or introducing Paul Biya's son Frank Emmanuel Biya into the governing organs of the ruling CPDM party. But recall, in my last broadcast, I indicated that there's no way to do that without Biya, and there's no way to do that without having a Congress. And of course, the fact that at the end of that meeting yesterday, no such thing was done simply confirms exactly what I had raised. So I had the opportunity to look through series of other articles on social media and in the various local newspapers, and some of them interpret the meeting that took place in Yaoundé differently. The authors see, a ruling party frightened by the approaching 2027 legislative and municipal elections, and increasingly conscious of, popular dissatisfaction, internal divisions, and unresolved disputes over candidate selection. you know, candidate selection within the CPDM had generally been a problem, with the members of the Central Committee believing that they could impose candidates on people at the base, and the people at the base believing that they have the right to choose who will, protect their interests. That is still within the CPDM party. So that revolt, it's real, and so they had the opportunity to come face to face with it, and that's why even at the end of that meeting, it's difficult to say what they really, achieved. So those interpretations need to remain, distinguishable. The claim of panic belongs to, of course, the authors of the various articles and the news organs. But what is peculiar is that about all the news organs that reported on this, shy of Cameroon Tribune and the L'Action, that are basically CPDM-run news organs, saw panic. So it is not, I will not say that is something that I am determining all by myself. But several underlying questions that have come up regarding that meeting are legitimate. Who will select CPDM candidates? How will the party manage generational competition? Because do not forget, those at the helm of the party or holding all the governing positions in the party are somewhat about 80 years and above. That is the median age, is 80. You may have some who are 70, something or other, but the majority of them are 80 years and above. When will its structures be renewed? Is there going to be a Congress? In the current dispensation, in the current situation where Biya is battling with his life and his health and all of those things, how will those structures be renewed without a Congress? And how will a Congress be held without Biya as long as he's still breathing some air? And perhaps most importantly, how does a political party built for decades around Paul Biya prepare simultaneously for elections and for the possibility of eventually exiting without Paul Biya, or eventually existing, I beg your pardon, without Paul Biya? These are some of the issues that are requiring some closer attention. So this is where an electoral meeting becomes part of the succession story. So you see, the meeting, although when they came, they gave the official purpose or raison d'etre of that meeting was that it's around elections. But following all of what I've explained, this is where you now see how an electoral meeting becomes part of the succession story in La République du Cameroon. And the vice presidency has made the uncertainty even more serious. And I've had occasion to explain this, but we're looking at it now from another perspective, that there is an extraordinary ingredient. In April, Cameroon restored the office of vice president. The constitutional reform made that office central to presidential succession, central, replacing the previous arrangement under which the Senate president would temporarily assume presidential function before an election. Yet, the vice presidency remains unfilled. The office of vice president remains vacant. After my last broadcast, I saw some people wrote in comments, and some of them reached out to me to say, "Oh no, although the provision that said that the president of the Senate will take over if the president, the president resigned, became incapacitated, or died, that although it was replaced by the provisions creating the position of vice president, because the vice president has not yet been appointed. If something happens, the Senate president will still just come and say, no, you have to go back into that constitution. Does the constitution say that? The constitution simply took out that provision and inserted the vice president and closed everything around the office of the vice president, and during the office of the vice president, even with the power to be the only source to seize the Constitutional Council to report that the presidency had become vacant, or the president had become incapacitated, or the president was no longer enjoying all his faculties and so could not continue to run the affairs of the state. So the whole thing is locked around the vice president, and the Constitution did not explicitly give or come up with any provision to indicate that they could fall back to the president of the Senate. That has got to be explicit. And that is why this moment is extremely explosive, because that leaves Cameroon in an unusual situation. A constitutional mechanism intended to provide certainty in the event of a presidential death or incapacity exists, but the person required to activate that mechanism has not been appointed and may not even be appointed. Viewing the conflicts, that are prevailing right now, and the strength of the various power centers that are neutralizing each other around every single effort to appoint a vice president in Cameroon. And worse, Post-Biya is age 93, heading to 94. That does not mean a constitutional catastrophe is inevitable, but politically, it means every extended presidential absence inevitably becomes connected to succession. Because where it stands, no one has an idea when Post-Biya will return to Cameroon. Not even the government has dared to advance any date or any specific time frame during which he could come back. And if you go through the press release issued by Professor Jacques Famandongo, a communications secretary of the ruling CPDM, he's telling you, even if Post-Biya stayed out there for the next 5 years and is still alive, the country will continue to stay where it is right now. Because nowhere in the constitution is it indicated that prolonged absence will mean that the president cannot run the affairs of the state. This is really amazing and so interesting. So we'll see the extent to which the people of La République du Cameroon will be cowards and accept to be governed by either a picture or, signatures that are constantly changing from abroad. So the question that is asked now generally is, who becomes vice president? Who influences that appointment? Who fears it? Who benefits from continued delay? These are the numerous questions that are coming to the table right now, given the prevailing situation and Post-Biya's continuous stay abroad. So those questions now hover over virtually every major development in Yaoundé. And while that question is continuing to, create shock waves in all quarters, not only within Yaoundé, but also especially in Paris, because, Paris has an interest in seeing that, Cameroon doesn't descend into chaos. But right now, Emmanuel Macron and his advisors appear to be hitting a snap each time they try to, broker a truce and see that someone is quickly appointed vice president. So they have, at some point backed Frank Emmanuel Biya, but that doesn't seem to be going, and the tension continues. And now enter Issa Tchiroma Bakari in all of this as a second center of political contestation. So Tchiroma continues to dispute the official outcome of the October 12, 2025 presidential election and presents himself as the legitimate winner. More importantly, he is no longer limiting that challenge to political speeches inside Cameroon. He has internationalized everything. In June 2026, Tchiroma filed complaints before the Paris Court of Justice against Biya and the other senior officials of his government over alleged repression following the disputed presidential election. The reports say he invoked the universal jurisdiction. I had talked about this before, more elaborately. So reports this month also describe additional legal initiatives in Switzerland. Of course, I had mentioned that one too. So these proceedings should not be presented as, judicial findings against Biya. Filing a complaint is not winning a case, and allegations are not convictions. But politically, their significance is different, totally different. Tchiroma is attempting to move the confrontation beyond Cameroon's institutions and, place aspects of the dispute before foreign judicial systems. And this takes quite some leverage away from the Cameroon judicial system that could easily muzzle the whole thing or manipulate these things under the carpet, with the Constitutional Council always certain to say non-reservoir. So Tchiroma's most provocative move this far, is speaking directly to the military. Even more consequential, as I said earlier, has been Tchiroma's rhetoric towards Cameroon's defense and security forces. Reporting this week, in almost all the news media and what I see on social media, says that from his exile in the Gambia, Issa Tchiroma has appealed directly to the armed forces to facilitate his return to Cameroon while continuing to insist that he won the 2025 presidential election. This is a major escalation in political rhetoric. It introduces the military into a dispute over electoral legitimacy. And Issa Tchiroma Bakari is holding that in all the military barracks where the election took place, he won about 70% of the vote. And so he tells himself that, of course, the military people too are disenchanted with what is going on in Cameroon, but just have an issue of chain of command or an issue of organization to flush out the current system. Do not forget that Maurice Kamto had made similar attempts, but in Maurice Kamto's case, he was quickly apprehended because he was still in Cameroon and thrown in jail, where he stayed in Kondengi for over 8 months and then was only released at the behest, insistence, and of course intervention of Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. And so that is where considerable analytical caution is necessary. There is an enormous difference between opposition mobilization, a contested election, civil resistance, and a military intervention in politics. Military intervention can produce consequences far beyond what political protagonists intend. The intention will be, I just want the military to come in and help and do this. But if the military decide now, we have decided, we have taken that bait, we have listened to you, Issa Tchiroma Bakari, and we are ready to act, and they jump into the arena, are they going to end at just making sure that they install Issa Tchiroma Bakari as president? Are they going to actually go out there simply to install Issa Tchiroma Bakari as a president? Or something else may happen which was unintended at the time Issa Tchiroma Bakari urged the military to come in. So nevertheless, Tchiroma's appeal demonstrates how far the legitimacy dispute has traveled. His recurring addresses also serve another purpose, maintaining political momentum while he remains outside Cameroon. His strategy appears designed to keep supporters psychologically mobilized around the proposition that the 2025 presidential election remains unresolved politically, regardless of its official legal conclusion. So the fact that he continues to call himself the president-elect, the legitimate president, and all of those things, he is trying to tell everyone that the issue of the 2025 presidential election remains completely unresolved, that it is not yet fully resolved. It is still contested. I'm still fighting against, the system that is in place, and I want everyone to know that this fight is far from over. So his promised return, therefore, becomes part political event and part mobilizing narrative. Now you are looking here at two men abroad, two competing narratives of authority, because both of them are now abroad. Issa Tchiroma is on exile in the Gambia. Post-Biya has taken should I say a quiet flight or a quiet escapade to Switzerland. So both of them are out of the country, and their close aides and even themselves are sending out very competing narratives. So there is an extraordinary symbolism right here. Tchiroma, Post-Biya is abroad while remaining the internationally and constitutionally recognized president. Of course, that's what he is. He has what is called the legal recognition, and Tchiroma still believes that he holds the legitimate recognition as president. So Tchiroma is also abroad while continuing to claim that the electorate gave him the presidential mandate, thus he is the legitimate president of the country. So one derives authority from the existing constitutional order, or one derives, authority from the existing constitutional order. The order contests the legitimacy of the order's electoral outcome. So that does not make their claims legally equivalent. They are not, because Post-Biya, at least if he were strong, active, and working, perhaps the agitations or the pronouncements by Issa Tchiroma Bakari will not carry the same weight, because politically it produces competing narratives at a moment when the state needs maximum clarity. And this is occurring while Cameroon simultaneously faces the southern Cameroon's conflict, insecurity elsewhere, of course, in the northern regions of the Republic du Cameroon, economic pressure with a skyrocketing foreign debt, and serious economic challenges, and increasingly sensitive succession debate. And on top of all of this, the icing is placed by the Post-Biya family drama. So the succession battle becomes even more complicated when we enter the presidential family. Frank Biya has long figured prominently in speculation about the post-Biya era. The April constitutional reform restoring the vice presidency intensified that speculation, because whoever occupies that office will become extraordinarily important in succession. So international reporting has explicitly discussed Frank Biya among the figures around whom dynastic succession speculation has developed. But Frank's path, assuming he even seeks the presidency, is far from uncontested. The controversy involving Georges Gilbert Baonla demonstrates how personal the struggle surrounding the Biya name has become. Baonla presents himself as Post-Biya's eldest son, and has publicly challenged questions surrounding Frank's parentage, including demands for DNA testing. Don't forget this. Those claims remain allegations and should be treated as such, but a lot of public bickering is showing that they may not really be totally devoid of any veracity, of any truthfulness. What is independently clear or clearer is that Baonla was arrested in Edea during the night of July 21 or 20th to 21st, after becoming embroiled in renewed controversy involving Frank. So reports describe a forceful arrest following an alleged refusal to comply with gendarmes. What I will not do is, I will not, however, state as fact that Frank ordered Baonla's arrest, but information from insiders, information from region barons attest to the fact that Frank Biya actually lodged a complaint which has not been made public all the same, and has been accusing Georges Gilbert Baonla of defamation, saying he made a lot of defamatory statements about himself and about his parentage. So the distinction strengthens rather than weakens this analysis, because the important story is that a public battle over competing claims about the presidential family has reached the point of arrests, legal proceedings, and demands for DNA testing, while Cameroon is simultaneously debating presidential succession. That is extraordinary enough, without adding what cannot yet be proven. Because if I want to delve into a lot of the things that I've heard that cannot yet be proven, it will show a situation far more complicated than what we know. So that's why I'm staying on issues that are actually proven, and the ones that have actually been said to me by people within the system that I trust. So let's look at Chantal Biya and the multipolar succession question at this point, because there is First Lady Chantal Biya, who is also not letting things go the way they want to go. Recent reporting in Jeune Afrique, as I talked about before, has fueled discussion of competing interests involving Chantal Biya and figures close to the presidency. And I've got secondary reports describing Jeune Afrique's investigation, point particularly to tensions involving Nathalie Moudiki and questions surrounding Chantal's son Frank Hertz, whom, of course, there are indications Chantal wants to position as the Executive Director General of the National Hydrocarbons Company, the SNH. So there is what I can reasonably say is emerging as a family feud of very vexing proportions that is miring the entire situation and making, this succession question even more complex than it would really have, appeared. So let's look at Frank Biya versus somebody else. Is there someone else other than Georges Gilbert Baumla, other than, Ferdinand Gongo or Oswald Baboke, who is now in very dirty waters? Of course, you say it could involve several interesting centers of power: the presidential family, senior ministers, security officials, economic networks, CPDM apparatchiks, constitutional institutions, and competing ethnic and regional constituencies. But forget about the fact that I englobe all of this just to show you the numerous, polls from which interest in that position of President of the Republic are emerging and growing very, very, very strong. So Frank's biggest problem may actually be the Biya system itself, because Frank's most challenging issue right now is actually the Biya system itself. This produces one of the great paradoxes surrounding Frank Biya. His greatest political asset is his surname. Don't forget that. His greatest political asset is his surname, Biya. But that surname may simultaneously be his greatest liability as well, because of all of the evil things that are being associated to the Biya name. And you look at the state of development of the country, everything is Biya, 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 Biya. So being Paul Biya's son potentially gives Frank proximity to networks accumulated over 4 decades, but it also makes him inseparable from public judgments about his father's record. That's what I was just saying. So if Cameroonians become increasingly dissatisfied with the economic situation, governance, corruption, prolonged conflicts, or political stagnation, a dynastic candidate would inherit not merely Biya's political machinery, but potentially the Biya fatigue. Because right now, after 43 years and counting, there is an undeniable Biya fatigue within Cameroon. And that's why you see people watching and talking about what is happening in Switzerland in case he closes his eyes as the white smoke. People refer to the notion that he could close his eyes and not reopen them as the emergence of the white smoke. That is looking at exactly how a pope is selected. White smoke means we got a pope, Abemos Pam Pam. But dark smoke means that man is still there. White smoke calls for celebration, for joy, for happiness. Dark smoke calls for sadness. So this tells you, the level of the Biya fatigue in Cameroon. And inside the establishment, officials who spent decades waiting for their own opportunity may have little enthusiasm for watching the presidency move from father to son. I have said this. Louis-Paul Motaze is watching and, acting. Laurent Esso is observing and, gesticulating here and there. The northerners beside Issa Tchiroma Bakari, quite some of them are also watching and gesticulating. And a lot of these people have had access to illicit money and have embezzled money, in tens of billions, and are waiting for the ultimate moment to strike. That is why succession is personalized in personalized political systems can become dangerous. I guess you understand what I mean there. That is why succession in personalized political systems can become extremely dangerous. As long as the party remains unquestionably dominant, competing ambitions remain suppressed. So as long as I told you about the cobweb system will be at the pinnacle, as long as Biya remains at the pinnacle of that cobweb, is breathing some air, talking, taking decisions, signing a few decrees and all whatnot, those competing ambitions remain suppressed. As uncertainty about departure grows, previously hidden ambitions begin surfacing, and surfacing very clearly. So let's look at the CPDM's electoral problem. So like I pointed out earlier, the CPDM has been doing everything possible to ensure that they even nip the issue of elections in the bud at all. That's why they have been, coming up with regulations to extend mandates, extend, and postpone elections and postpone as much as possible, because they fear that any election held right now may even become the kicker for the chaos that they are struggling to run away from while they take care of succession at the helm of the state. So where does Southern Cameroons fit into all this? For Southern Cameroonians, especially advocates of self-determination, like myself, these developments will inevitably be washed through another lens. A prolonged struggle for power in Yaoundé will weaken the central government's ability to maintain a unified political strategy in the face of the Southern Cameroons conflict. Conversely, instability at the center could also increase unpredictability and security risks. Neither outcome should be assumed automatically, of course, but people have been watching out for this within the Southern Cameroons for a long time, and there are things that are definitely going on. But the fundamental Southern Cameroons question does not disappear simply because Yaoundé becomes consumed by succession. Indeed, it may become even more pressing. Any eventual post-Biya government will inherit a conflict that military force has failed to resolve over many years. It will eventually have to decide whether to continue the existing approach or seek a credible political settlement. For independence advocates like myself, therefore, the strategic question is not merely who replaces Biya. Does the transition create an opening for an internationally mediated settlement addressing the underlying Southern Cameroons dispute? So this is what it is. So we may say at this point, because of the visual, that well, Cameroon is not necessarily collapsing, but its certainties are. Cameroon may not be collapsing, but its certainties, the certainties of Cameroon are totally collapsing daily before everyone's eyes. Of course, the distinction is essential. There is no evidence today that the Cameroonian state has ceased to function. There is no constitutionally declared presidential vacancy. There is no verified military takeover underway, and there is no evidence that any particular succession faction has definitively won. But virtually every major source of political certainty is being questioned at the same time. The president remains abroad. His return date is unknown and even uncertain. The vice presidency is vacant. The promised government after the 2025 presidential election remains unformed. The ruling party is confronting internal and electoral pressures. So, and then there is an opposition leader abroad who continues to challenge the presidential mandate and address the military. European courts are being, drawn into politically explosive allegations. The presidential family is surrounded by increasingly public disputes and succession speculations, and Cameroon still have unresolved armed conflicts and considerable socio-economic pressures. This combination deserves very serious attention. So this should be telling you that the situation in Cameroon isn't as easy as anyone thinks. So let's close this up. Let's wrap this up by saying that for the 6 days of Biya's absence may therefore ultimately be remembered not simply as another long Paul Biya stay abroad, but as the period when Cameroon began discovering whether the system Paul Biya constructed would survive the approaching reality of Cameroon without Paul Biya. How will it go? How will things end? When is this thing going to happen? When will the spark come? Will it be in the morning? Will it be some afternoon, some evening, or will it be some deed in the night? These are the questions that are on the minds of everyone. So I want to end right here, and I want to thank all of you who were part of this live broadcast for the time you shared with me. And of course, if this is your first visit on the JMA Connections, go right ahead and hit on that subscribe button and personalize, so that anytime anything new drops on this platform, you will be the first to know. And of course, always remember, I say that so that whatever I know, you may also know. As soon as I hear it, you get to hear it faster than everyone else. And of course, do not forget to share the link to this communication as much as possible. Let's reach as many people as possible. And then drop a comment. Be part of the conversation. And as usual, avoid insulting people. Stay on the issues. Let's be constructive. If you insult anyone, I promise you, I will take it. I will, delete that comment. And most especially, do not forget to drop a like. It generally goes a long way. So thank you very much for your kind attention. To God be the glory.
Nos frères Ambazonia ont encore frappé fort. Voilà 2 soldats qui nous ont encore quittés. Mais mes frères militaires là, policiers là, vous défendez quoi dans le nozo? Vous cherchez quoi dans le nozo? On vous parle d'un peuple qui se bat pour sa liberté. Comme le peuple francophone n'a pas le courage de se battre, comme nos frères du nozo sont en train de se battre. Vous partez tout le temps là-bas. Vous endeuillez vos familles par rapport à quoi? Pourquoi? Pour ça, voilà Judith Rachid, PDG de Cantel, en train de faroter l'argent. Quand vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez même pas de quoi manger. Vous vous levez le matin, vous n'avez pas de quoi boire. Vous n'avez pas la possibilité d'envoyer vos enfants à l'école. En 2025, on a volé vos élections. En 2018, on a volé vos élections. En 1992, on a volé vos élections. Un vieux père de 93 ans. Vous partez là-bas, vous daillez pour qui? Pourquoi? Voilà la plus grande tchèle du pays à qui on est en train de donner l'argent. Vous vous battez pour qui? Pourquoi? Les chrétiens coûtés sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Les Judith Rachid, PDG de Cantel, mangent leur vie. Tous les ministres sont là-bas, mangent leur vie. Vous gotez, vous daillez. Daillez même au moins pour la bonne cause. Ce n'est pas la secte pourquoi que vous êtes en train de combattre, les gars. Vous êtes en train de combattre vos propres frères, vos compatriotes. On ne vous a pas envoyé qu'il aime les terreaux. On vous a envoyé qu'il aime vos propres frères. Vous allez vous battre. Et tous les jours, vous daillez. Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre nos frères Ambazonia quand ils gèrent les mouvements comme ça, là? Vous croyez que nous, on peut être contre eux? Regardez la dame-ci. Vous croyez que si la dame-ci avait son salaire normal à la fin du mois, le PDG de Cantel est dans les 500, 600 000 francs CFA. Vous croyez qu'elle devait faroter l'argent comme ça? Les liasses de Didi Kolo. Vous êtes là, vous gotez là-bas. Parce que vos frères ont dit que non. La constitution de notre pays, on est une partie souveraine. On veut que les lois de notre pays soient les lois de notre pays. Post-Biya prend ses frères et Kambeti Boulou. Il envoie là-bas pour leur commander, pour leur dire ce qu'ils doivent faire. Alors que les traités du pays ne le permettent pas. Quand nos frères du Nord se lèvent, vous vous levez. On vous envoie avec le gun, le kilam.
If you're asking my personal opinion to keep Cameroon one must be divisible. Because it's a cliche that Cameroon is one and indivisible. Because it's not true. Culturally, we are divisible. Language-wise, we are divisible. The law-wise, we have inherited that. So, anybody who says Cameroon is one and indivisible is a fallacy. And so, we would have to handle that issue very squarely and objectively. And that's what I call the truth. The truth must prevail. There is no doubt that there are people of both sides, that cherish their heritage. And the only way of keeping Cameroon together is to respect the respective heritages that we do have.
Asawana. Asawana, Asabuam, Asabuam, Esimene. Yeah, fellow Ambazonians, today is the 18th of February 2026. A Major General Tokandu and his court live there for Kumbu Town. Now one Ekelebe this where he come out today, the patrol for we street them like say now them get the area. But we don't give them message say Bui na a land of no return. Now one example, this one we don't set am for them. How we there for Kumbu, they don't come settle for them. They make like say that them get the area. You want to serve as a message for the remaining terrorism where they there for inside town. Let them know say Bui Tutu na a land of no return. For sleep, no be say you don't die. For the sleep, no be say you don't die. We warriors, they are alive. We warriors, ASA, they are alive. And we take them down one by one. Now once Zumbi this way, we don't kill them. We confront inside town, we shoot them. We take it, we see they are alive, we want to come back for root. He die for root. We want to make them confess for him up. No be so? No be so? No. Space there for a kelebe? No. No man. Shake no day.
Nos frères en bas boy ont encore frappé fort. Voilà.